In this series on my channel about comebacks that crashed and burned, I've chosen what to cover based on my own negative personal feelings. I did not like Venpara personally, and I've always thought Fever was okay. Not great or bad, just okay. Both Venpara and Fever weren't like serious failures because their album sales were sturdy, even if the reception wasn't always positive. As I go on, I want to improve from my mistakes, and in order to do that, I wanted to choose a comeback that was the opposite of everything I've ever discussed before. A comeback that actually saw a decrease in sales and interest. A comeback that I actually really liked, that has more evidence, not just hearsay, that it failed. I've chosen albums from groups that I really liked, but never from a group that I really loved. And that's when I knew I had to choose a group that I had stuck by for years. To make this fair, I have to take shots at my own faves. And there is no other comeback on my list of failed comebacks that applies to all of my criteria more than RBB by Red Velvet. RBB and where it sits in Red Velvet's discography is fascinating to me and always has been, because its effects seem minimal in hindsight, like it's just another Red Velvet comeback. But when you think about it, RBB symbolises a lot of what pushes Red Velvet forward, but also what holds them back. There is just so much about it that in the grand scheme of things changed Red Velvet's approach to comebacks forever, and you can see its after effects in every Red Velvet comeback that came after it. Let's set the scene. It's 2018 in K-pop. It's the start of the 4th gen and everyone is filled with excitement at the debut of G-Idol, Stray Kids, LOONA, IZ*ONE and ATEEZ. BTS has managed to reopen the gates of the West with their Love Yourself series, and the established top girl groups like TWICE release Yes or Yes and Summer Nights, and Blackpink release Square Up. Which leaves us with Red Velvet, who released 4 different projects throughout that year. But the project that people remember the most from that year for Red Velvet is probably their repackage of The Perfect Velvet, which included the title track Bad Boy. I've seen a lot of Revelovs over the past few years who have gotten over Bad Boy and claim it's just your stereotypical K-pop song for newcomers who don't know anything about Red Velvet. But back in 2018, Bad Boy was definitely something brand new for K-pop that unknowingly paved the way for a lot of the title tracks we see now. Every second of Bad Boy is satisfying and enjoyable. The harmonies are beautiful, and the rarity of a low-key type of R&B song being a title track for a K-pop group's comeback was unheard of back then and became refreshing for K-pop in 2018. These are all reasons why Bad Boy received the acclaim and the love of K-pop stans across the world. Specifically, it appealed to the West the most, as Bad Boy may have been a new style for a K-pop group, but for us, these types of R&B hip-hop inspired songs were all the rage back in 2018. Red Velvet had never really been known as a group created for the West. They have only one member that's fluent in English, and their Red and Velvet concepts usually aim to capture Korea and Japan. But Bad Boy was different. SM seemed to have come to a smart revelation that Red Velvet's dark concept could be used as a way to appeal to the Western market, and suddenly for the first time in forever, SM seemed to be fully invested in trying to expand into the Western market. Before, in the early 2010s, it was only an afterthought, a possibility, something they tried once and then gave up. But with their competition like YG and Big Hit having hit makers that were so close to making it big in America specifically, SM wasn't going to turn down an opportunity. Bad Boy's reception on Billboard's World Digital Song Sales chart was a chance to seize that opportunity. So a few months after Bad Boy's release, they released a cute English version of Bad Boy acknowledging its appeal in America on their seasonal summer Mini Red album, which is usually aimed at South Korean listeners. But after that, SM had an idea. Maybe they could attempt to make another international K-pop hit like Bad Boy again. Considering Bad Boy did well in South Korea and had interest in America, if they kept pushing, maybe they could make it work again. It's a lot of maybes, but it's worth a try. With all that being said, on November the 30th of 2018, RBB was the 5th mini album from Red Velvet and the 4th album they released in 2018. RBB, which stands for Really Bad Boy, is supposedly the sequel to Bad Boy. Really Bad Boy may be one of Red Velvet's lows as a title track, but Red Velvet's lows are still really great. I've ranked all 104 released Red Velvet songs as of 2022, and there are only 4 songs I felt out of that 100 that I can say are truly terrible, and RBB is not one of those 4 songs. I find that sometimes Red Velvet songs can be vocally out of place, like they'll have one song of that faux talk singing rapping, and then Wendy will hit a high note that's really off-putting out of nowhere at the end of the song, like in Zimzalabim. However, throughout RBB, the members of Red Velvet are all vocally playing to their own strengths. The screamed whistle notes by Irene, Wendy as always with stunning vocals, the wonderfully sung bridge by Silgi and Joy, Yeri making the song come alive with the fun talk singing verses. Every member has purpose, and since every member is contributing really strong vocal performances to the song on the same level as one another, the harsh edges of having Wendy belt all over it while nobody else does have been smoothened. The concept of RBB is that of a modernized take on a Halloween 80s concept. At least that's how I interpret it, and I love it. I think the RBB album and concept was ahead of its time in K-pop, as the retro concept was still very new in 2018, which mirrored that of the West, as it took 2 years from then until we really reached the point where the 80s and 70s revival had become mainstream in pop music. This song could only be delivered well by one K-pop group, and that's Red Velvet. When it comes to the music video for RBB, I find the Hollywood sign really endearing and an intentional self-aware cheesy acknowledgement of the market they were trying to capture with this album. I'm sure Hollywood is where Claudine Wolfe lives. The car with the leopard print interior, the 80s styled blazers which were the epitome of women's fashion in the 80s, but with a modern take on it, with Yeri wearing a Nike sports bra underneath, Irene's sparkly crop top that would look cheap on anyone but looks like it's worth millions on Irene, and finally the whole music video being intentionally shot like it's a set of an old Hollywood movie where Red Velvet are the stars being hunted down by some wolf. It might not be my favourite Red Velvet music video, but it's still of great quality with cool design and a fun campy storyline. But despite the really bad boy era being something different and creative that I personally enjoyed, there is many reasons as to why RBB crashed and burned, and how detailed the concept is has nothing really to do with it. In actuality, RBB is one of the many perfect examples of SM's biggest problem when trying to push groups into the Western market: being in the wrong place at the right time. Red Velvet was seeing a slow increase in album sales each comeback, but RBB was the first comeback Red Velvet had since One of These Nights, when an album saw an actual serious decline in sales. I mean, it's not a drastic decline, but it's still a decline. And you can see on the graph how afterwards, after RBB, the sales come shooting back up. Like, that tells you so much. Really Bad Boy is the only Red Velvet comeback to have received no music show wins out of all of Red Velvet's albums, and for a big 3 group this is kind of concerning. Where Bad Boy was a strong balance of satisfying both the East and the West, Really Bad Boy ended up pleasing neither side. But why? Let's start at the very first problem. Really Bad Boy is a Halloween inspired comeback. There's imagery of Red Velvet in front of a pumpkin, you see the little boo in orange letters hanging in the grass. Everywhere you look, media outlets call it a Halloween comeback. The question is, if this is a Halloween comeback, what's it doing being released at the end of November? It's not as bad as releasing a Christmas song in September, but it is awkward to release a Halloween album at the end of November when Halloween was long over and people were getting ready for Christmas. In a Refinery 29 review of Really Bad Boy, Natalie Morin writes, "Imagine being so powerful that you bring back Halloween on the cusp of winter. But I'm not really too sure whether bringing back Halloween in November was actually a powerful move for Red Velvet's team to make, or that it even brought Halloween back at all. One of the biggest Mandela effects about RBB is that it was delayed. Or is it just me? Because when it was released, I immediately assumed that the comeback had been delayed in October, but When I did research, I realised that no, RBB seems to have always been planned for November. It's odd, and it certainly didn't help. People like to listen to music seasonally, not in a strict way, but more in a, oh it's summer, I'm gonna put Boogie Up on kind of way. And if RBB was released at the beginning of October, this definitely would have brought bigger hype to the comeback, like how TT by Twice was released on October the 24th. Granted, it's still at the end of October, but the fact that they chose November 30th, like the end of November, like why not even just the beginning of November? I don't know why they did that. The second problem, which is glaringly obvious, that not a lot of people talk about, is the type of song Really Bad Boy is, and how SM were a little bit behind with their choice of title track. RBB has the traits of like an early 2010s Ariana Grande song. Ariana loved to use that saxophone and brass motif in her music, and Red Velvet have done this twice similar to Ariana. I'd say Dum Dum is probably the equivalent to Bang Bang, as both songs are executed well by its performers who bring a lot of energy and presence. But RBB's equivalent in Ariana's discography is probably Focus, and if you know anything about Ariana Grande's reception as a pop star, you'll know that Focus failed to capture the public's attention due to the chorus not being fully developed, and also because people got tired of that sound after her big hits like Problem and Bang Bang. RBB suffered coincidental problems. As much as I gushed about Really Bad Boy's cohesiveness and being a great exhibition of Red Velvet's vocal talent as a group, that was kind of the only positive thing most K-pop listeners took away from the song, and the negatives started to outweigh the positives. It was the sparse verses and immediate jumps into the chorus that left no room for people to breathe and even understand what they were hearing or what was going on. The structure of the song lacked build-up except for Silky and Joy's bridge near the end of the song. Funny enough, I think because back then we were only just getting used to the streaming era's effects on music and how it was made, hearing a K-pop song at 3 minutes sound this abrupt and barely expand on itself was a little bit irritating to a lot of Red Velvet's casual listeners. Revelovs are used to Red Velvet's experimental nature, but casual listeners who just got into Red Velvet after Bad Boy at the time were in for a rude awakening. And many complained about it to no avail. In general, the only reason I thought to draw these similarities to Ariana is because at the time I noticed how RBB, the song itself, was behind the times. As I remembered when Ariana was still doing this, it was 2015 and RBB was released 2 years later. 2 years later, after Focus, Ariana had long abandoned that style, and ironically enough she had leaned more into the R&B genre, just like Red Velvet, who had been leaning into that for Bad Boy. It seems like SM were right on the money with Bad Boy when it came to trends, but fumbled the bag with RBB, as it was somewhat outdated for 2018. With the letdown of the title track RBB, many clinged onto the album's B-sides. Red Velvet have developed an incredible reputation of having the best albums in the K-pop industry, and rightfully so. The album continues to play into their 80s concept more than the Halloween aspect, which helped me love the era a lot more. Butterflies, So Good and Taste are excellent. Sassy Me is an introduction to producers Moonshine into Red Velvet's discography, and they are welcome to stay. The album ends on the English version of Really Bad Boy, and all I can do is compare Bad Boy's English version to RBB's. I know a lot of people do regard Bad Boy as one of the best K-pop English versions, which I get, even if the lyrics are giving shady AF comebacks. RBB's English lyrics, on the other hand, literally just sound like random words stitched together that have no correlation. So why did Bad Boy's sequel fail to capture neither North America, its target audience, or South Korea, the other target audience? Well, I think the main reason is that the song just wasn't on trend at the time of its release, and that was its biggest downfall. The timing, the sound, and the structure. It wasn't that the Korean public were turned off by Red Velvet doing something more girl crush red instead of cutesy Red. It was more that the song wasn't naturally catchy enough for the public to care. And for those in North America, people weren't really interested in brass-infused pop music anymore at the time. It was behind the times in both markets. Remember when I said earlier on that SM is always in the wrong place at the right time when it comes to the West? Now that I've explained a bit about RBB, maybe you're wondering why I said that or what I meant. What I mean is that SM have kind of been doing the wrong things to break into the West since 2018 and onwards. Let's just get this out of the way. Sometimes SM is way too complicated and pretentious for their own good. There, I said it. It's one of SM's biggest strengths, but as we get into the 2020s, I find it more to be becoming a weakness of theirs. For years, SM have been creating groups with experimental themes, which I do appreciate about the company, as SM's experimentation is one of the parts of K-pop that keeps it exciting. But at the same time, I wonder if right now, where simplicity and easy listening is really popular in K-pop, especially amongst Western consumers who also love a good soft, bold but not in your face, non-abrasive K-pop song, whether SM have passed up on the one group in their recent 3rd and 4th gen lineup who appeals to Western taste the most, due to one mistake. When I look at aespa and NCT sometimes, I find their concept so grand it's overwhelming. It's hard for NCT to make serious waves in the West when they have so many members, and Westerners thought 7 people in BTS was outrageous. It's also hard for aespa to make it big in the West too, because their concept can read as alienating and difficult to comprehend. However, Red Velvet is one of SM's only groups in recent years to have a concept that might not be simple, but regardless, it remains globally accessible and really interesting. It's easy for a Western audience in particular to understand that Red Velvet is just two sides, the light and the dark side, kind of like having one side that's the Spice Girls where they make camp pop music, and then the other side is top tier R&B like Destiny's Child. It's infinitely more appealing. Red Velvet's concept is unintentionally timeless and easy to adapt to any market and any trend. The flexibility of Red Velvet, which was displayed with the release of Bad Boy, taught companies the lesson that sometimes less is more. But when Red Velvet are a bit too rigid and don't use their concept as a way to commentate on the trends, the magic doesn't work. Yet, I wouldn't have it any other way. What has always drawn me to Red Velvet and what makes them so special is their ability to mix doing things for the charts and doing things for the arts, and they also blur that line many times. When a K-pop group is gifted with such privilege by debuting under a Big 4 company, I like when big companies use their privilege to take liberties in their art. There are like 3 or so other Red Velvet comebacks I'm sure people would say are comebacks that crashed and burned depending on the person. And overall, I prefer Red Velvet to have this balance of freedom, where they can adapt to the trends, make their own trends, and if they feel like it, they can do whatever they want no matter what's on trend. While RBB may be one of Red Velvet's poorest performing comebacks, I can't help but have a special place in my heart for it. It symbolised the end of trying to appeal to the Western market with Red Velvet for SM, and the effects of RBB could be seen in every album that came after it. If Red Velvet were going to do experimental, the song had to be over the top insane instead of just lukewarm camp. And for this Halloween in 2022, I'll be cherishing the RBB album, no matter if it failed or not, because the West isn't really the be and end all of Red Velvet. Red Velvet can survive anything, as we've seen, and I'm proud they survived RBB.